Welcome to Wall Street Confidential. Our topic now turns to the mortgage crisis and how it is spreading outside the mortgage industry. Some stocks you might want to keep an eye on. For this, we turn to Jim Cramer, the co-founder of TheStreet.com. Hi, Jim. Your column this morning in Real Money talks about how the mortgage perils are spreading. Maybe time for Bernanke and company to really start taking notice.
I mean, I think that they have a very strong view of the Federal Reserve, which is that it's contained, and that's one of the reasons why a bunch of them, of Fed presidents, want to tighten. I think the most important thing to recognize is that everyone's asking whether it's contained in various places. It's clearly not contained in retail, although no one really wants to admit it other than BJ's, which had a comment which says, look, we've expanded heavily in Florida, and people can't sell their homes in the Northeast to move to Florida, so Florida doesn't have the growth anymore. You'll see it in Brocade. Brocade mentioned that they're worried that financial services are big customers of theirs, and they think that a lot of the financial service firms are going to be rocked by this. Now, none of this may impact the Fed in the same way that the Fed felt that it didn't matter that gasoline went from $1.50 to $3. And look, I'm not saying that the Fed, it could be wrong. I am saying, though, that the idea that your house is declining in value is a far more worrisome thing than how much you paid at the pump. And your takeaway could be that that the Fed shouldn't act until it's not just a question of whether it will be hurt, but it's not just a question of whether it could be hurt, but whether it will be hurt. But my issue is the way the Fed works is that by the time they get the rates to where it may actually stimulate as opposed to just be psychologically positive, might be 8, 9, maybe 12 months from now. And if that's the case, then you will already have far realized that it does hurt. I think it can be preventive. But there's just a lot of hawks on the Fed, and they just don't think this is right.
For investors who want to sense what the red lights are right now, before they get to the next conference call, because when you talked about BJ's and Brocade, those risks were highlighted in their conference call. So before we get to the next conference call, what are some red lights for investors looking at their stock portfolio? If it may not be a stock in the mortgage industry, but maybe something that is not as vulnerable as they thought.
Well, the consumer spend, domestic consumer spend is down. I think the Fed doesn't do a lot of homework. These are things you're not supposed to say about the Fed, but I just don't care anymore. The Fed is looking at companies that do a lot of business overseas and crediting America with that. I think that's a very big mistake. The Fed is looking at inflation that's being imported from overseas, chiefly from China, and worried about that. We can't do much about that. The Fed is looking at food inflation, which is mandated by the government's emphasis on ethanol. CPI does not include home price. So the data is just not any good because it's the home price that's bringing everything down. So, I would tell you that if your company's domestic, you've got to rethink it.
All right. Thanks very much, Jim Cramer. This is Wall Street Confidential. I'm Farnoosh Torabi. Thanks for watching.